right, boys and girls, we're going to start doing all of our episodes in sign language. Here it is, marketing management and money.
And Ryan Owens is officially fired, so this is now the Ryan Murray Show. I'll see how well I fly solo.
Late night with Ryan Murray. That sounds saucy, man.
Whew. Okay, welcome to an episode of Marketing Management and Money. I'm Ryan Murray.
Man, you need co-host for that and a smoking hot diva.
Which I get neither out of you.
Ouch.
And
it hurts so bad only because it's so true.
For those who actually want an episode today, what are we talking about? I feel like I'm trying to be mature here.
Slow down. I know you are, but I'm not. I'm not ready to go there yet.
All right.
We need to mess around just a little bit more. So you said you'd get neither of those things in me. I'm a diva, man. I may not be smoking hot, but I'm definitely a diva. So at least you got that, right? It's a bonus.
So to our listeners out there, if anyone is interested, I'm looking for a new co-host. If you know it, according to his standards, you don't have to know a lot about business.
Tryouts are also done in ASL. Welcome back to another episode of Marketing Management and Money. We are your hosts, Ryan Owens and Ryan Murray, and we are definitely going to get mature now and start our episode. Yes. We're gonna start into the topic, which I think is something that's on the minds of a lot of people, especially in times like these with economic downturn or what have you. Should I start a small business due to economic factors, to any other outside factors, right? Mm-hmm. These are things that we can't control and whatnot. And how do those things play a role in our thought processes and in our amount of courage or our amount of risk aversion, so that we're willing to take on more risk? We're less afraid, or even if we are afraid, we're like, well, crap. It's like, I got to do this. Yeah, I have to, even if I'm scared, So what are some of these factors? Why don't we kick it off there? We already mentioned the economic side of things, but
so interesting that you picked this topic, as we're trying to figure out topics, and you're like, hey, this has been on my mind, I want to talk about it. I'm like, that's great. I had just this last week, I got a referral for a small business that's starting up, and it was someone that I knew that they were kind of helping this entrepreneur, and they knew that I did this, and so they reached out to me, and they're just like, hey, can you help my friend? They're getting ready to do a business. Can you just give a couple pointers? And sure. And I'm like, love to. Like, this is what I do.
We could talk about this all day long.
Happy to do it. And I felt like I was a little bit baited because they're like, good, they're right here.
Oh, geez. I'm like, I love those scenarios.
I'm like, well, what would you have done if I said no?
Right. You're like halfway done with your lunch. They're like, here, talk to him right now. You got a mouthful of lasagna.
So, the way that I kick it off with this potential entrepreneur is, I'm like, all right, so it's in the midst of a pandemic, everyone's shutting down, and you decided to open up.
Right.
Like, you either have a lot of courage or you're stupid, or it's a mix of both. They appreciated the humor. I'm like, hopefully they don't take that the wrong way.
Welcome to entrepreneurship. But nobody's sure.
Like, behind every joke, there's a bit of truth. And
yeah,
I'm
sure,
like,
exactly.
Honestly, you either have a lot of courage or you're stupid, or a little bit of both.
Yeah.
And I want to talk about that stupidity factor of, man, when everything's pointing in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
Like,
some people run the opposite way.
Yeah. Everyone is running out of the burning building, and you're just like, that looks like good real estate.
Right.
Let's go check it out.
So I'm gonna tweak your. I agree wholeheartedly. Like, and I get the direction that you're going, and obviously this is coming from a joke, right? But I think it's important to tweak the stupidity title that you're giving this, because I don't know that it's necessarily. I mean, maybe it is stupidity. I mean, I'm not a shining example of the opposite, but maybe we call it like turning a blind eye to some of these factors, right? I don't know what term you would put to it.
You're going to be politically correct. I'm not, because I have seen.
I'm not trying to be politically correct. I'm just trying to. I don't think it's stupidity, because stupidity to me implies like a lack of intelligence, right? And I don't think it's a lack of intelligence. I think it's just ignoring some of these factors. Like, it's almost like a brazenness Right?
Okay. And thank you for the clarification, because that's a good clarification. But I want to put this out there. Entrepreneurs oftentimes get very emotionally caught up in the moment.
Oh, yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
I want to be very clear. If you are overly logical, that is not necessarily a success principle.
Right.
Like, you have to have a balance of logic and emotion.
For sure.
We are emotional creatures, and anyone that thinks that, I'm only going to use data and I'm only going to use science, and I'm like, well, first off, sir, your life is incredibly boring, and second, you're not always right. Like, how often
do you talk to yourself a lot? Dude, you walked into that one. That's okay. I'm here to spice up your life.
Thank you.
Be a little bit of a diva.
Okay,
you're welcome.
You be the emotion. I'll be the logic.
Okay,
here.
deal.
Sweet.
Wait, that wasn't a compliment, was it?
No.
Dang it. I just.
So anyway, when they get over emotional, and a lot of times you'll see this in a startup where someone's like, "Oh, I've always wanted to do this," but oftentimes you'll see this in existing businesses where it's like, do I expand or do I hunker down? Do I play it a little bit smart? And I picture a good poker player here, where like you're looking at your hand.
Sure.
And sometimes you're dealt a great hand and sometimes you're dealt a crappy hand, but your goal as an entrepreneur is to play every hand
yeah,
consistent.
Yeah. Like your clients, you make your clients feel like you're winning at every turn. And on the inside, like if they could see the soft, gooey internal guts of this thing, they'd be like, whoa, you don't have any confidence whatsoever.
Yeah. So jumping back to this particular entrepreneur, she was launching a tanning salon. And, I flat out said to her, I'm like, you're gutsy. And she said, well, the area that I'm going into, so she looked at the microeconomics.
Okay.
And she's like, the area that I'm going into actually is booming right now because of the housing market, and there's some opportunity. And as she started spelling these things out to me, I'm just like, dang, like you've done your homework.
Yeah.
And I honestly think that this is a smart bet. So even though everyone is, they're folding in that, hypothetical poker game that I'm talking about.
Yeah.
She's holding her cards, she's playing it close to the chest, and she's making some calculated moves in what she's doing. And so I look at this and I'm like, okay, in entrepreneurship, you're dealt a hand.
Yep.
And sometimes, that's full house, and sometimes that's a high card.
Yep.
And so it's like, how do you play that? And right now, a lot of people are being dealt a high card.
Yeah.
Like they don't even have a pair going on. And you can still win if you play that hand correctly.
Right.
So let's talk about that. And the first thing that I want to talk about, so I mentioned that microeconomic factor. How big of a role does the economy, the overall economy, play on starting a business? I mean, right now, unemployment is high. Everyone's GDP is down. And when I say everyone, I'm talking like at an international level, like countries are losing money.
Right.
Wealth has, evaporated in this pandemic. Is that a good time or a bad time to start a business? It depends.
Sure.
And so looking at it as an entrepreneur, you got to be able to kind of read the signs, understand what you're looking at. Are you walking into an opportunity or are you walking into a disaster? Yeah. And you got to kind of check that emotion, that ego at the door.
For sure.
And say, okay, what are my trusted advisors telling me? Now, when I say trusted advisors, immediately you kind of picture the boardroom and it's like, oh, well, you should do this.
George Washington.
I'm talking,
Mahatma Gandhi.
Like, find a successful entrepreneur, take her to lunch, and ask her some advice.
Yeah.
That's a trusted advisor right there.
Yeah, right.
What's she saying? She's been in business for the last 20 years. Mm-hmm. What's she saying about where the market is today?
Yeah.
And, and then compare that to a couple other people. What are they saying? And just kind of feed on this and, and get some outside perspective to where you're in a position that you're like, okay, I'm not only going off of my own gut check. It's either inspiration or indigestion is what I love to say.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and I think that a lot of entrepreneurs, well, a couple of things, because you covered a lot of ground there. Holy cow.
I did. I apologize. I kind of, I just,
yeah, right. Wind it up and let it rip. So, it's like those chattering teeth that you see with the feet. You wind them up.
When you're sitting here, you're like, how do I put this thing back together?
I know. That's kind of how I know, right? I'm like, outside factors. Anyway, so I think that a lot of entrepreneurs who are successful entrepreneurs and could essentially repeat their results, right? Like
Sure.
That, to me, like, you can't be dumb and get there intellectually, right?
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, I think you absolutely can lack emotional intelligence and have that intellect and make that happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that alludes to the point of your need for these external advisors, this advice seeking in these kinds of times, whether that's economic or something along the lines of like a personal crisis or, you know, like a loss in the family, these external things that you can't control. It's important to have this trusted board of advisors. And I think that that's one of the big takeaways that could come out of this episode is that having, and I'm going to say, a well-rounded group of trusted advisors, because you don't want all of the same person. You don't want yourself 6 times over.
And
right?
and I'm glad that you got on that, because, you know, I'm hearing in my mind confirmation bias. You know, if
I see.
If I already believe that my business is going to be successful, and then I surround myself with people who are going to just agree with me because they want to be agreeable.
Yeah. So if you're intellectual, get a diva. Apparently I'm seeking a job. So you guys need a diva, let me know.
But yeah, as you're going, you know, find someone who's going to challenge you. And, you know,
exactly.
let them poke some holes in your plan.
Well, and I've struggled with that concept my entire life, honestly. Up until I've kind of, you know, I'm going to say as I've gotten older, I'm mid-30s. I'm not that. I'm a baby still, right? But as I've grown up, as I've matured, I've come to understand what that means. It's not necessarily like, yeah, you know, I always thought it was like, hey, pick somebody that you're going to butt heads with. No. Like, you can get along with people who have a different opinion. This isn't high school anymore.
They think differently.
Right.
They have a different background. They come from a different industry.
Right. And this is somebody who's willing to and has the experience to play the devil's advocate. Yeah. Right.
And you might think, as you're listening to this, you might think that we're talking primarily about startups here. We're not.
No. This is any stage of business, any role within a business, right?
Yeah. And think about this. You know, you've been in business for a while, and you've surrounded yourself with a bunch of advisors. Well, what happens over time is you guys gravitate, you know, like you guys start to blend and mesh. Well, when was the last time that you sought outside advice from someone who, you know, isn't entrenched in your way of thinking because you've been going to the same advisor for the last 17 years and, you know, you guys are so in tune that you don't even need to go ask this person anymore. You know what they're going to say. Like, no, grab someone else. It doesn't mean that you need to ditch that person that you've got history with.
Right.
But grab someone else and be like, hey, what do you think?
Yeah. Right.
You know?
It's like a lake. If you don't have fresh water coming in and fresh water going out, and water going out, it's
pretty stagnant, nasty.
Yeah. Gross.
Right.
Your business will do the same.
And so
let's talk about, so we've talked about, like, I think that's a really good, like I said, a great takeaway for this episode, but let's talk about some of the other outside factors that can impact businesses that entrepreneurs don't have control over.
Yeah, and that's where I wanted to go as well.
Perfect.
And so I'm looking at this, and, you know, we talked about the economics, okay? Deals are won in up markets. Deals are won in down markets. And I don't think that the economy should be the driving force of whether or not you start a business.
Right.
But it should be. When the economy is moving, when you're at those big swings in the economy, when things are changing, you obviously need to factor that in. I was talking to a good friend of mine, and she works a lot with businesses. And, so we love to share ideas and talk about the different things that she does. And sometimes when she has a business that she's kind of struggling with, she'll pick my brain. And she was telling me about these two guys that they launched a gym in a small town, and they went huge with it. Like this massive, it's the size of this gym that you would see in a major city.
Dang.
With, a place that has 100 times the population of what this was. And so
they're counting on everybody in the town coming to that gym.
Well, that was the comment that I made to her. I'm just like, well, okay, they have to get like 90% of the population, and that includes grandma and the newborn baby that are going to come to this gym.
Now, they don't have to come, they just have to pay membership dues.
Spoken from experience.
Bingo, nailed it.
But, so they open in the middle of this pandemic, and I'm like, dude, did you guys notice that there's all sorts of health restrictions in place, and gyms are not allowed to fully operate?
Right. And
where you're already, playing the odds not in your favor, and then you've got this huge thing. So, my friend, she comes to me and she's like, "You got any advice for them?" And I'm like, "I don't. I'm sorry.
Don't do that."
Yeah. You shouldn't have done that. Yeah. That's where it is, and they're highly leveraged.
Ooh, yikes.
And I just feel bad.
Well, okay, so we're kind of talking about you're talking about this pandemic, right? And how this pandemic has affected. So it's like these acts of God, essentially, that it's like you can't control an earthquake, right? Sure. It's not necessarily economic, because we talked about that piece, right? And so now we're talking about you have this massive earthquake or a tidal wave, right?
Yeah.
In recent history, we've seen things like massive tidal waves flood
the fires in Australia.
Huge fire or wildfires, and you've seen massive hurricanes, right? Hurricane Katrina coming sweeping through in the South America, the southern portion of the United States. Oh, that's weird to think
you have to say that really long to not go to South America.
I know. But so they're still recovering from that. The South. So they're still recovering from that, though, right? Mm-hmm. So is that, you can't see these things coming up, but when they hit, so there was, I didn't work with this small business particularly, but I've kind of kept my eye on them throughout this whole pandemic, because they opened days before here in America, before the huge shutdowns, all the massive shutdowns occurred.
Okay. Yeah.
It was 4 days or something like that. They're like, "Hey, we're open for business. Come in and eat at our restaurant." And it's like, COVID, baby. And they were like, we shut down. And so they had to adjust, right? They had to manipulate the way their plan and the way they were doing things in order to stay afloat, right?
Yeah.
Because they couldn't just be like, "Well, that sucks. Shut the doors, claim bankruptcy, let it all go." They're not going to do that, because these are entrepreneurs. We're tough, and we're, go get them kind of a style.
Yeah.
And, what is it about that situation that makes me say, as an entrepreneur, I'm not going to shut my doors. I'm going to handle this. So, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I get what you're saying. And there's something that I need to point out. It's super obvious, but we forget it all the time. And I'm not just talking like you and me forget it. As entrepreneurs, we forget that entrepreneurship is meeting a need. The bigger the need, the bigger the opportunity. And when you talk about these businesses that they're like, oh, what are they doing when they're they're facing these disasters?
Yeah.
It's like, well, what is the need? If you just had a huge earthquake, do you really need pizza delivery?
Yeah, right.
And if you do, if people are all of a sudden they can't get food, and they're like, wait a second, you do pizza delivery.
We need delivery service.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so if that is the need, and you can fulfill that need, that's probably a better business to be in than a nail technician, where no one's really worried about getting their nails done right in the aftermath of an earthquake.
Well, and I think that's another key point, another key takeaway for this episode is adapting, right? And meeting the needs, whatever, even if you are an established business, you can shift gears a little bit and all of a sudden take advantage of these opportunities that present themselves in any given market and take advantage of that and leverage your business toward filling those needs. And you can make it big that way, right?
So I was down in San Diego. I was at this, it was actually an entrepreneurship conference.
Very cool.
And, we're hanging out. In the middle of one of the sessions, the lights go off.
Nice.
And, you're in this big conference center hotel. And, so everyone kind of just chills for a minute. The emergency lights are shining, so it's not like it's pitch black by any means. But, so we're sitting there, and the lights, they just stay off. And finally, you get the hotel staff that they're just going through the rooms, and they're saying, looks like power's out, and it's not coming on for a while. So anyway, come to find out that it was a massive power out. There were about 1.5 million people in this area. So, I mean, San Diego, it's populated anyway.
Sure.
There's about 1.5 million people that were without power, okay? So, at first, it's power outage. No one thinks anything of it. But then, dinner time starts to roll around.
Yeah.
All the restaurants and the grocery stores are closed.
How do you cook food?
Yeah. How do you cook food? Everyone's there on convention. They're stuck in a hotel. So it's like, I don't know. They're like grabbing granola bars out of their backpacks and stuff like that. And the few places that had food, like they were just, it was like just an arm and a leg for crappy sandwiches that are thrown together.
Go down to the gas station and buy a day-old egg salad sandwich that's super questionable. And you're like, well, this or go hungry. So
So this power outage ends up going through the rest of the evening. It comes back on at like 3 a.m, something like that. So the very next day, and this is where I saw entrepreneurship at its finest. This guy, he went and got a bunch of T-shirts screen printed that said, like, I survived the great power outage. But it was so rapid.
Yeah.
He was there selling shirts on the street corner.
Dude, that's awesome.
At daybreak. Yeah. And so everyone's just like, whoa. And he's sitting there and he's selling a ton of them. And I'm guessing
I bet he was.
Those shirts were popular for probably a half a day.
Right.
But when you talk about
novel.
being adaptable, I look at it and I'm thinking, if you're a nail technician and all of a sudden an earthquake happens and it's like, well, maybe I'm just going to shut down my business for a little bit. I'm going to go out and serve. And, I'm just going to put on my branded logo.
Exactly.
And when people are like, hey, don't you own that nail shop? Yeah, but this is the bigger need right now. I'm like, be adaptable, help out, do whatever you got to do.
Exactly. Well, so being adaptable leads me to the next point. And I know we're getting ready to wrap up, but this leads me to the next point that I wanted to cover really quick, which is we've seen, at least in my time here on this earth.
You just stated you're not that old.
I know. Molly, come here. Got a story to tell the youngsters. Just kidding. So it's like when you see new technologies or you see these shifts in our way of life, right? Mm-hmm. So think about it. I'm mid-30s and the first cell phone I had was like, I was like 15 or 16, right? Mm-hmm. And they were like these janky, old, crappy flip phones that had horrible screens and you could barely text from them, right?
Sure.
So we go from that and in 2 decades, right? And it's like, whoa, 20 years, that's a long time. No, it's not. Like in 2 decades, we've gone from that to we have these wicked powerful smartphones in our pockets. We have all
you can run your entire business off of this thing,
right? But you think about, where we came from in terms of like the Industrial Revolution and everything that occurred, and that was in the history of the world. That wasn't that long ago, mm-hmm. And so things are accelerating in an incredibly rapid pace, right? And we're seeing all kinds of new technologies evolving from that. So we had like this mobile revolution kind of a deal, right? And now we're starting to see, in terms of like manufacturing things, we're starting to see additive manufacturing become this crazy thing, right? And
for those of you who aren't aware, additive manufacturing is like the correct name for 3D printing,
right? 3D printing and stuff. But even from there, you also see in the medical field, you see advances being made in terms of like microbiology and cellular technology, all these crazy kinds of things. And so as entrepreneurs, it's like there's two questions that I want to ask here. Number one, it's like, when you see this big shift occurring, is that something that you bring into question when you're starting your business? Because it's like, when automobiles were first invented, people were like, no, I'm still selling the old horse and buggy. You know what I mean? And they weren't on board with the automobiles. But then, and so it's like, in that instance, yeah, it's smart to jump on board with the automobiles because, I mean, hindsight 2020, we know it goes somewhere. But then Microsoft comes out with the Zune, right?
I've never heard of that.
Exactly. And so it's like, so you remember when iPods were like brand new and they were all cool?
Yeah.
So the Zune was Microsoft's version of an iPod.
Oh,
right?
I thought that was Dr. Seuss's version of a Waggledy Whack and Zunity Zune.
Yeah, exactly. It's like MySpace. Does it even exist anymore? Actually, MySpace does.
It does, yeah.
But still, I actually don't know if Zune is a thing or not. But that's a technology. It's like, if you would have invested in that or jumped on board with that, you're not doing so hot right now.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's like, how do you navigate those waters, essentially, right?
And I think that you actually you answered your own question with your example, but it's embracing the correct technologies, moving forward with change.
Oh yeah, that makes sense. It's so easy. I get it. Totally answers my question. Doesn't answer my question.
No. When you as a business, when you're trying to meet that need, that customer demand, you can't move backward. If all of a sudden, on this automobile example, if they were trying to just keep upgrading the horse and carriage, but keep it a horse and carriage,
okay. So
that's not going to meet the demand.
Sure. So let's look at this. So right now, Elon Musk is huge, right?
Okay.
Elon, everybody knows who he is and what he's doing and whatever. So right now he's working on his SpaceX venture. Is that something you jump on board with?
Well, okay.
And I'm not saying the company itself or his product, whatever you want to say itself, but the notion of accessible space flight and like returning rockets and fuel cells and all that kind of stuff. So you jump on board with that.
So let me answer it this way. And I'm going to kind of summarize a whole bunch of things that we've talked about in this answer. And that is that when the outside factors are weighing heavy on your entrepreneurship ventures, whether you're growing an existing company, whether you're looking to start a company, whether you're branching off something from your company, when there's a lot of outside influences, it can be a pandemic, it can be economics, it can be acts of God, as you put it. When those are happening, the need for solutions increases, which means that the need for entrepreneurship increases. However, the people who are going to solve those needs are not going to solve tomorrow's problems with yesterday's solutions. And so as an entrepreneur, you've got to push the envelope. And if that's SpaceX travel, sure, that's fine. But you've got to be willing to push that envelope.
Yeah.
And so... And it kind of just wraps up with all this. And I am going to wrap up because, we've covered a lot of ground. But it's this idea of get those advisors that are giving you some outside perspective. Understand the needs that are present with these changes in the environment around you. Look for those opportunities and don't be afraid to step forward into it. And so, it can be a scary time, but it can also be an exciting time for entrepreneurship with these outside factors constantly pushing in. And so
I love that. I love that.
That to me is kind of the takeaway. Is it's like there's always a need for entrepreneurship. In fact, today there is a greater need for entrepreneurship than there was pre all of this craziness that's going on in the world. And so if you're an entrepreneur and you're willing to step up to the plate, you're needed. Get out there. Make it happen.
Get out there and do it for sure.
So with that, let's go ahead and wrap it up.
All right. Fine.
Thanks for tuning in. We loved having you. This is Marketing Management and Money. You can find us at marketingmanagementmoney.com. Leave some comments. Let us know what you think, and we will catch you next week.
You guys are awesome. Ciao.